quick lesson on processing pine pollen as a nutritional supplement. These were just collected yesterday, which actually works out really well because the buds will continue to put out pollen. This is the male part of the pine plant, and any true pine has edible pollen, and the way you can tell if it's a pine is if it has a sheath on its needles right here. If you're unsure about how to identify a pine, please consult with somebody who knows. This will avoid you a lot of trouble. Pine is a great first wild crafting experience because the pine trees put out tons and tons of pollen. So you're sure to not interrupt their reproductive cycle, and you can go ahead and make this for people that you love. First step is shaking the pollen out, which I'll go ahead and put them right up next to the container. We don't want to waste any of this pollen. This is a half-gallon glass mason jar. Quart size would do well if you were not processing as much, but we're going to be processing all season, so we'll be using this larger jar. You got all your pine buds in there about halfway full, and you start by shaking, and you see the pollen starting to come off. So we've shaken a lot of the pollen off. There's so much pollen in each of these, so if you have plenty of time, you can really mush them up in here. And then we'll take the next set. Shaking them till you see a lot of the pollen that's on them down in your bowl. These are collected in big clumps, which is an easy way to collect them. But when we start shaking it in a strainer, it's a lot easier if they're broken up. So you can get in here in your collection bag. I like to do this with gloves on because this is something that your friends and family will be eating raw. And anytime you're sticking your hands excessively in something that, or needing your hands to process it, it becomes excessive. You don't really want to feed someone something raw that you've had your fingers in. Halfway full, locked up, and shake. This is the results of the first shaking and straining. You can kind of see that there's the little tiny brown sheaths in there, and then of course needles got in here and some of the other buds got in. So this is a finer strainer, and we're gonna run it through this so it's real nice. Oh, we got one needle in there. You can see it just coming out. It's gorgeous. So this is what we've got, gorgeous yellow powder. And this can be used to make different preparations we'll go into, or just eaten fresh. You can put it in your tea, you can put it in with any sort of baked good. Use a wide mouth funnel, which are great to have with ball jars or any sort of mason jar. And we're putting it in a glass jar to store. Because this is something that we're collecting in spring where there tends to be lots of moisture in the air, and most pollens have an element of protein as part of their composition. Proteins can go rancid really easily, as can fats, and due to the moisture content that just is in the air during the spring, we want to keep this in the fridge or the freezer. So this was about 1/3 full of a grocery bag, and you got about 1/3 full of a quart-sized jar.